Vera Lawyers. Today is September the 24th, 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. We are starting one more live stream. And as usual, if you are participating here live with us, you have a priority in terms of choosing the topics to be discussed. If you don't suggest a topic, then you're going to look into our backlog. And let's get started with the daily news. Let's see if there is anything interesting on the newspapers, right? This is UOL. All right, UOL is the largest news portal in Brazil. And today, the main headline is about an airline crash involving a Chinese national and Brazilian movie producers, okay? And we also have here, as typically we have, like updates on the dispute between Brazil and the United States. Here is like President Lula during his speech at the United Nations. Information here being shared is that Lula, or the federal government, they called the Brazilian Supreme Court and spoke with the main justice, who's kind of aggravating, if you will, the United States with decisions that, according to the U.S. government, are silencing voices from the left side of the aisle. Okay, there is also a very interesting picture over here, and this was actually shared by the United Nations. This picture shows President Trump watching President Lula's, presentation at the United Nations. I think this picture is so interesting, right? So it looks like President Trump actually saw, the complaints or, the accusations by President Lula. And he was still really nice, during his own speech in terms of President Lula. President Trump said he likes Lula. He want to talk, he want to discuss, he wants to make a deal, right? So it was very surprising even to President Lula. And during President Trump's speech, the camera would focus on President Lula, and he was basically surprised that President Trump was actually mentioning him by name and saying nice things about him. It was a very interesting speech, to say the least. All right, now let's take a look. Let's take a look at our friends over here. We have Alan T. You look like Jimmy Fallon or Carson Daly. All right, thank you for participating, Alan. We have Travel Jones. Good to see you, Travel Jones. Gracious greetings, good sir. All right, thank you for showing up, Travel. How are your plans going? How are your plans developing, Jones? Let us know if things are evolving at your satisfaction, your findings, how your journey is progressing. I'm sure your colleagues, they can always learn something, particularly when you're going through this amazing journey that you are, Travel Jones. And we have a Ronnie Dio. Bom dia, Ronnie. Good to see you here. It looks like we have more viewers joining us as time passes. Let's share this information. Is being requested constantly, the information for our partner real estate agency. That's Remax. This is a Remax agency located in Rio de Janeiro. They are in Leblon, Zona Sul of Rio de Janeiro. I would say the most traditional neighborhood in Rio de Janeiro. And they operate not only in Rio, but they actually operate across the country. So if you need a realtor, if you need someone to guide you through, to get you a listing, or, to help you start your journey, towards immigration on a more permanent basis, secure a property in Brazil. If you're planning to do Airbnb, right, like something very often that I hear is like, well, if I buy a property for the sake of securing residency in Brazil, do I need to live there or can I do Airbnb? And the answer is absolutely yes. You can do short-term rentals. You don't need to live in the property. You do need to keep the property for as long as your immigration journey lasts, meaning you're not going to be able to sell it like in the short time, but you could sell it like down the line if you secure, for instance, like the citizenship. All right. Okay. Matt Gain, it's good to see you, Matt. Oi, Dr. Oliveira. Matt and Adrian are on. We had a productive meeting with Camila last Thursday. Glad you know, Matt and Adrian. So good to see you over here. And Matt and Adrian, if you have any questions, right? If you have any points of doubt about things in your journey, don't forget, feel free to suggest as a topic here, and I'm going to further elaborate for you, all right? Like here, you can disclose, as much or as little as you want, but what I'm saying is like feel free to share any points of concern for us to address. But I'm very glad to hear, Matt, that Camila was helpful. Camila, for those of you who don't know, Camila, she is the owner of the real estate agency, right? And she's the one you see on the picture in the last slide of the Remax ad, okay? And that's, usually the person you're going to communicate the most. There are other team members that I am familiar with. There are at least Liz. Liz, she stays like full-time at the office. And there is also Laissa. Laissa, she works out of Fortaleza, okay? But she works remotely, with many clients. All right, that's the deal. Travel Jones, things are progressing well. I have a bit of work on my part, but all is well. Scary and exciting at the same time. So good to hear, Travel. Yes, that's always the case, right? Like if you buy a property, like for most of us, right? Like unless you are a billionaire, but for most of us, whenever you buy real estate is a major step, and is difficult to make money, right? Like enough to buy real estate. So when you have the savings, like you want to make sure that you are spending it correctly. You don't want to run unnecessary risks. So I totally understand, Travel Jones. Josh Iolas, bom dia, Josh. Interested in learning more about obtaining background checks from the U.S. and how Oliveira can help. So Josh, background check, interesting subject, right? Like, I mean, typically whenever people ask about a background check, they are typically talking in the concept of, or in the scope of the United States. People are going to be talking about the FBI background check. For Brazilian immigration, the FBI background check is like the gold standard. And that's going to be typically the requirement whenever you are applying for a high-end immigration benefit. So for instance, if you marry a Brazilian, or if you buy a property, right? Or for most of these higher level, immigration pathways, Brazil is going to require for or from U.S. citizens the FBI background check. Okay, now interesting enough, like if you are applying for something, more entry level, like the digital nomad visa, typically they are going to accept something that could be either on the municipal or state level. Okay, so it's not like a single standard, and that's a common mistake we see out there. Like people, they sometimes they Google, right? They're using like Google AI, or they're using ChatGPT, and the AI tools, they are not at this point yet of understanding the nuances. But so going to the FBI background check, the challenge that you're going to have of getting this done from Brazil is that there are no providers for the FBI fingerprinting in Brazil. Okay, at least not officially, right? And I say at least not officially because we have in our offices, like we have the actual FBI fingerprinting stock card, the official one. So what we do for clients who hire our services, like for the service, not for the service of doing the fingerprint, but for the immigration service, we can, do the fingerprinting, send this card to the FBI in the United States. Once the FBI issues the background check, then we send the PDF, because that's how you get nowadays the FBI background check. You get in a PDF format. We send it to a partner in Washington, D.C. They get the apostille attached to the printed out version of the FBI background check. And then at the end of this journey, we have this document sent back to Brazil. So in other words, with our help, clients can get an apostilled FBI background check. Now, we don't assist self-applicants, right? So let's say if you are handling the immigration journey yourself, we're not going to assist with just this piece. We need to assist with the entire thing, because otherwise, many times people are going to, have issues with their decisions, and many times they are going to try to find someone to blame, right? So in our experience, handling these things on a piecemeal basis is not ideal. And therefore, yes, we assist with the background check, but as long as we are assisting you with the immigration journey, right? So let's say if you are applying for residency based, on marriage with a Brazilian, that's the service that we're going to be providing. We're going to assist you with securing the residency through marriage, and within this context, we're going to assist you with the FBI background check as well. All right, Josh, I hope that was helpful. Matt, I also find out that my Fed retiree health insurance is accepted by numerous facilities in Brazil. If that helps with the retiree visa route. Good to know, Matt. That's it looks like something similar to what we see happening with veterans from the U.S., right? Like veterans, they typically have a health insurance in the U.S. that provides coverage in Brazil. So it looks like it is a similar type of situation, Matt. And is he gonna? This is helpful indeed. First, because like once you move to Brazil, you're gonna have some coverage, right? Like for the transition time. And second, if you wanna apply in the U.S., this would be helpful, right? Now, this is in case you're gonna apply for the retirement visa route. That's exactly what you said. Yes. So in this case, you could potentially apply in the United States. All right, Matt. And we help with those applications both in Brazil or in the U.S. Travel Jones. Yes, Camila, stop. Thank you for sharing, Travel Jones. I'm going to let her know about your comments. Thank you for chiming in. Christopher E.M. Boa tarde, Dr. Luciano. Boa tarde, Christopher. To comply with real estate investor visa requirements, can one send foreign money to their own Brazilian account, tag it for real estate, and subsequently pay the seller in reais? Christopher, so you cannot send money to yourself and have it tagged as money to buy real estate, right? Because whenever you tell the bank that you are buying, real estate, they're going to say, all right, so they're going to expect you to send the money to the seller. Okay, and if you send it to yourself, they are not going to be able to release this money under this track of real estate. They are going to need to tag the money as availability, right? Availability, it sounds like a lay term, but it's actually a technical track that the Brazilian Central Bank is going to use to trace money entering Brazil. So if you send the money to yourself, there is no way for you to tag as money to buy real estate. And the paperwork associated is not going to mention real estate. Okay. Now, here at the firm, like we were able to approve a couple who had done just like that, just like what you said, right? Like they sent the money to their own bank account, and shortly afterwards, they sent the money to the seller. And we prepared a very strong documentation package, and they were able to secure the real estate investor visa. Now, like they didn't work with us for the transaction, right? Like, so they came to us after buying the property, and that's why they came as is, right? So what we say, Christopher, is that this is not fully compliant in our opinion, and you do run the risk of having, your application denied. Now, if you have bought the property doing what you just said, we say, listen, we can, try to help you. We're going to document, the transaction in other ways, trying to bring enough comfort for the immigration officer to conclude that even though you kind of didn't follow to the T, the money transfer is still a legitimate acquisition, and therefore, you should be entitled to the immigration, visa based on real estate, right? But our understanding is that this is not fully compliant. So typically, when people hire our services, we're going to avoid that path, right? Like we're going to have a payment sent directly to the seller. We use a partner currency exchange bank to reduce the risk of non-compliance by the seller. We try to time the release of the money with the day of the closing, right? So we like to say that we emulate an escrow. It's not a real escrow, but we emulate an escrow. The good thing is that you're not sending your money, to the real estate agent. You're not sending the money to us. You're sending the money to the seller, right? So you're sending the money to the seller. The money cannot go elsewhere, but we still have a saying on when the money is going to be eventually released to the sellers. All right, Christopher, I hope that was helpful. Ronnie Dio, question: whatever happened to the vehicle of the individual that you helped with the digital nomad visa that drove to Brazil now that they're getting married and becoming permanent resident? Ronnie, that's a great question. I remember he did renew the permit from the Brazilian Revenue Service. It's granted on a yearly basis, right? So he got like the first year successfully, and then he applied for a renewal. Last time I spoke about the vehicle, he was on the renewal stage, and it didn't look to me that he was going to be able to get it, right? And then now there is there would be a third year now that he has the marriage. Not sure what she's gonna do. That's a great question, Ronnie, because as you may know, not sure if you heard about this information before, but Brazil does not allow anyone to import used cars, right? Like there is an exception if your car is older than 30 years, which I don't think it is the case for our client down there. If it is older than 30 years, then yes, the Brazilian, customs, they are going to allow you to bring a used car. But other than that, only new cars, right? Like the Brazilian trade system, Brazilian trade mentality is extremely closed, right? It's not even about tariffs, right? Like tariffs is on a much lighter level, right? Like in Brazil, historically, we say, listen, no stuff from abroad, right? So it's not even about tariffs; it's about a blank prohibition. And something I do share every now and then, like when I was a kid, up to the 90s, you couldn't find imported stuff because there was a blank prohibition for pretty much anything that you could possibly imagine, believe it or not. So even if you would pay, 500% tariff, guess what? You couldn't send, stuff into Brazil. Everything was, just national. So imagine computers, video games, we didn't have access to anything from abroad because, again, Even if there was a 200 or 300% tariff, we couldn't get it in Brazil. So what I would do, and many people, all right, from São Paulo, that's where I was living, back then, we would travel to Paraguay, which is like a neighbor country. We would go on a Friday, like we would take a bus, like Friday in the evening, and about a Saturday around noon, we would arrive in Paraguay. And then in Paraguay, it was just like paradise because Ciudad del Leste, right? Ciudad del Leste is like the first city in Paraguay, neighbor to Brazil. And if I'm not mistaken, Foz do Iguaçu is going to be the Brazilian city, and then Ciudad del Este is going to be the Paraguayan city, right? Like their neighbor cities. And then this place was just like paradise back then because you would find pretty much every single thing you could potentially think of, like liquor, video games, computers, electronic stuff, like luxury items. And then you would buy those items very cheaply because basically there was little to no taxation on the Paraguayan side. And then as long as you would bring those items to Brazil, right, under your quota, guess what? Like you could bring some stuff, right? And the cost of traveling to Paraguay was not expensive. So back then, again, when I was a kid, I would travel often, right? Like, I would have, some savings. I would like to buy something that I could, never buy from a regular channel. So I would travel to Paraguay, buy this stuff, and then come back to São Paulo, right? But that's just some sharing. But that was a nice question, Ronnie. Next time I talk to him, I'm gonna surely ask about the vehicle. Brazil Vibes, thank you so much. Brazil Vibes is showing up and buy me lunch. Thank you so much. Very generous of you, Brazil Vibes. Brazil Vibes, Mr. Oliveira, what is the average processing time for those applying for the retirement residency while in the U.S.? So Brazil Vibes, if you are applying from the U.S., it's going to depend on the consulate, right? Like some consulates, they are, not sure if the word is better, but, some consulates, they're going to process your application faster than others. I'm going to give you an example of a consulate, a Brazilian consulate I like, the one in Houston, right? Like they're very effective, they're very respectful, like they answer emails, right? And typically they are going to review your application in a timeline between 20 to 30 days, okay? Now, very important, Brazil Vibe, is that collecting the documents in a compliant manner is going to be also, like time consuming. So I think you could allocate like between 1 to 2 months to gather the documentation, okay? And after these 2 months, once you submit the paperwork to the consulate, think about an additional month, okay? So altogether, 3 months of timeline may be a good guess for a Brazil retirement visa application in the United States. Now, I was mentioning about the consulates, Brazil Vibe. Something important to note is that you cannot do like forum shopping. You cannot pick the consulate you like, unfortunately, right? You're kind of stuck with whatever you have. And so you need to go through the consulate in charge of your jurisdiction. Like if you are in a state in which there is a consulate, let's say if you are in Texas, naturally there is, the Houston one. If you are in Georgia, there is the one in Atlanta, right? But if you are in a state that does not have a consulate, typically, the closest one is going to be in charge of your state. And then this is going to be the consulate that you're going to need to follow, right? Or you're going to need to interact with, for the application. When you were working with us, we kind of do all this legwork, right? Like we check the consulate. There is some level of variation of interpretation of requirements among the consulates. Very interesting to note, consulates in general, and that's something typical not only for Brazil, but actually other countries as well. But consulates, they have, some discretion in terms of how to handle paperwork or different requirements or, different visas. And we do see that happening not only for the Brazilian consulates, but, another example, Portuguese consulates in the U.S., depending on where you are applying for a visa, different requirements or rules may apply. All right, Brazil Vibes. So glad to see you here. Thank you again for buying me lunch. Josh Yolas, I'm applying for a digital nomad with Oliveira's assistance, but I am in São Paulo on a tourist visa. My concern is timing because the background check can take a long time and my tourist visa might run out. Josh, so you are in São Paulo and you are working with us, right? For the digital nomad. So let me say it very clearly, right? I would say probably 98% of our clients, they are gonna work with a background check for the digital nomad, right? That is not the FBI background check. The FBI background check is gonna be for those who are applying for something like the marriage-based permanent residency, okay? For the digital nomad, Josh, the background check, it could be done, very fast, okay? Let me give an example. In New York, you can actually get a background check through the court system. So it could take you, I don't know, like 50 minutes to get a background check. And, in Brazil, when you are working with a law firm, typically, and excuse me for repeating the typically because I need to do so. Otherwise, if there is an exception, if they don't accept, you're going to say, well, you said something and they did it different, right? Remember that the Brazilian immigration, just like the United States immigration or any other immigration, they have a discretion. So we always say typically because we say, listen, this is what we see happening, on a daily basis, but there is also the possibility that's not going to work in a particular case. But I can tell you that for 98% of the cases, we are able to approve digital nomad applications in Brazil without the FBI background check and without an apostille. So the background check, right, unless you are, for instance, like if you are in California, as far as I remember, there is nothing really like on the state level. People are usually going to do something at the county level. And then in California, the standard, as far as I remember, right, like you got to understand I'm not the one actually handling, right, like the interaction with the counties. Our team does that particular part of the work. But as far as I remember, in California, for instance, you can order the background check through an email, but they are not going to deliver unless someone shows up in person to pick up the background check, right? So there are some states that make things really, really easy, like in New York, right? New York court system gives a fully compliant a background check. California, yes, you can order very easily, but you need to go and pick it up over there, Josh. But I think, the upsides of your track, right, like the digital nomad, is that you don't need the FBI level background check and you don't need an apostille, right? So that helps a lot. Another strategy, Josh, right? Not talking about your case in particular, but talking about cases in general, right? Like, here we're supposed to discuss about immigration topics in general and not on a personal level, because otherwise it's like a consultation, and we are not authorized to do that in Brazil on a live stream and without charging like for the consultation. So talking in general, in terms of timeline, a strategy, Josh, that we use sometimes is like if you're missing one document, right, and you are under a tourist visa and you're running out of time, just like you mentioned, one strategy that we may pursue is to file your application even though you are missing one or two documents, right? And sometimes we try to provide something that's not fully compliant, but is as close as compliant as possible. typically the Brazilian immigration is going to flag those missing documents, and as long as this is a bona fide application, meaning that most of the other documents are present in a compliant manner, typically they're going to give you an opportunity to deliver those missing documents down the line, right? And so in your case, or in, let's say, in a general case, if one or two documents are missing, this person could potentially file the application. Once you file the application, based on Brazilian law, your allowed time to stay in Brazil should freeze. Meaning, let's say if you just have, out of the 180 days that you are allowed to stay in Brazil on a given immigration year, not calendar year, in an immigration year, you have 180 days and you just have 10 days, let's assume, right? You have 10 days. Once you file the application, clock stops, right? The clock stops, and then, during the timeline that the Brazilian immigration is reviewing the paperwork, time should not be counted for the purpose of, for instance, issuing a fine, okay? That's how the law works. I would say it works well in 95% of the time. In 5% of the time, sometimes, the immigration agent, they don't know how to calculate, or they don't know what they're doing. Sometimes they are new, and they may still issue a fine. And then you can typically file an appeal, to have that fine waived, okay? But there you go. Virgilio, greetings from the DR, Dominican Republic, right, Virgilio? Welcome. Ahmed Ayad, boa tarde, Miss Oliveira. I'm working for Camila for almost 2 months on my case, and she's been fantastic, super professional, proactive, and a breeze to collaborate with. Huge respect for her. So glad to see it. So glad to hear it, Ahmed. I'm very happy, and that's the type of collaboration we had been trying to achieve for so many years, and now we do have someone that we feel comfortable about referring out to our clients. Really good to hear from you, Ahmed. So good to hear from you. Brazil Vibes, my question wasn't clear. If I hire your service, what is the timeline while you're in the US? Obrigado. Perfect, Brazil. Listen, I would say we can get it done, like paperwork, probably in a month. And, the application plus approval in an additional month, right? Probably a couple of months from beginning to end, Brazil Vibes, okay? This is also going to depend on your time availability, right? Some documents we're not going to be able to get by ourselves. For instance, retirement paperwork is going to come from you. We don't have access to your retirement paperwork. We don't have access to your bank statements and so on. So there is also a need for you to participate in the process. But if you have availability, if you are able, right, to send, emails, access, we use Monday is a project management tool. Many clients, they like it. But if you are able to collaborate electronically, Brazil Vibes, I would say a month, to secure the documents, and then an additional month for the application to be processed. For the Brazil retirement, I think in most consulates they are asking nowadays for the FBI background check. So this is something that should be started early on in the process, Brazil Vibes. So let's say you retain our service, ideally in a week or two. You would be attending an appointment to do the fingerprinting in the U.S., and we can find a private service provider close to you for you to go and do the fingerprinting. They are going to send the PDF to you. Once they send the PDF to you, you're going to upload the PDF in our portal. We're going to receive it. We're going to send it to our partner in Washington, D.C. They're going to get an apostille, and then they're going to send it back. Okay, this is compliant. This is actually required by most of the Brazilian consulates in the U.S. I think it is probably, Brazil Vibes, the one that takes the most, that takes the longest. Okay, it's going to be the FBI background check. Everything else is kind of, fast. There is also the birth certificate, even though for the visa in the United States to be issued, like they would accept just a regular birth certificate. Many times when you're doing the registration while in Brazil, they are going to require an apostilled birth certificate, okay? And that's very unfortunate because something we've been suggesting to the consulates is like, listen, if in Brazil they're going to ask for an apostilled version of the birth certificate, do U.S. citizens a favor and ask them for the apostilled birth certificate as well. Because by not asking, you're not making their lives easier. You're just making their lives miserable because many times, they believe just because they are showing, the birth certificate to the consulate, they're not going to need an apostilled version. And many Brazilian Federal Police stations, they are going to ask for it, okay? Some of them, they're going to say, well, if the document was evaluated by the consulate, thumbs up, I don't care about the apostille. But I guarantee there is a large number of departments in Brazil that are going to require the apostilled version of your birth certificate. So those two documents, Brazil Vibes, are probably the ones that we should start as soon as possible, and therefore, hopefully get them covered like in a month timeline, or a month and a half, and have the other half or a month for the actual processing by the Brazilian consulate. Okay, Brazil Vibes, thank you for clarifying, and I hope that was on point. Josh Yolas, thank you so much for the clarification. That relieves a lot of my stress. Glad to know, Josh, and thank you for participating. Jonathan Macmillan, hola Luciano, Jonathan from the USA. Hey Jonathan, it has been a while. How is your journey going? I remember we spoke probably maybe a couple of years ago or a year ago. I want to know how things are going for you, Jonathan. Let us know. Josh Yolas, final question. If you have time, could you talk about spouses of digital nomads and how their applications for visa would work? Josh, yes, absolutely. The way we see the digital nomad, or better saying, the way that Brazil sees the digital nomad, they see as something very limited in time, more like an entry door to Brazil for you, to try the water, right? And therefore, from a more, a legal and conceptual perspective, digital nomad is not ideal for spouses or children to piggyback on, because the concept here is that you're coming to Brazil, to experiment, to try out some time in the country, and if you bring in a spouse and children, maybe it means you're not really trying out the country. You're more like immigrating on a permanent basis, right? So that's the way that the digital nomad is seen. Now, this said, yes, we have secured residency for spouses and children before. We always like to give this heads up, like, listen, digital nomad, not ideal. There is always a chance your application is going to be denied, okay? But most of the time, they are going to be approved. They are going to be approved, and the approval is typically after you register at the Brazilian Federal Police. Okay, so you have your digital nomad approved. There was the approval, and then you go to the Brazilian Federal Police. It is like an in-person appointment. They typically review your birth certificate with the apostille. They're pretty attached to this part of the process. They take your fingerprinting, take a picture, the biometrics, and then they are going to give you the if everything works well, they're going to give you the RNM card number on the spot. They don't give you the card. The card, unfortunately, takes a couple of months to become ready, to get ready, but they are going to give you a printout with all the information and the RNM card, the resident card number, is going to come on the printout. Once you get that, you are legally a resident of Brazil. And from that point on, then you can apply for residency for your, family members. Okay, you cannot apply before, because the application for dependents is gonna depend, is gonna rely on your approval. Okay, something we can do, I think, right? Like, I mean, I don't recall recent cases, but if I'm not mistaken, we can have, your application or the application for your dependent started as soon as the visa is actually approved, or, talking in more technical terms, the residency. Once your residency is approved, then we can apply for your dependents, and then, you could go to the registration potentially on the same day. So you go to do the registration, and then your dependents, based on your approved digital nomad, would become dependents of a digital nomad residency holder, okay? And their residency would piggyback on yours, meaning that whatever happens to yours happens to theirs, right? I hope that makes sense. All right, Jonathan McMillan, does your firm also handle getting a dual citizenship certificate, USA, Brazil, even while you're obtaining property and golden visa program? Dual citizenship. So, Jonathan, just try to understand that the dual citizenship, right? For Brazil, I mean, this is something you're gonna secure down the line. So if you are obtaining property, golden visa program, first you get 4 years of temporary residency, then you go to the permanent residency, and after 4 years of permanent residency, that's when you would apply for citizenship. Okay, so not sure I follow your question, but just provide some additional context so I can understand and better address it. All right, Jonathan. Cherry Mitchell, good day. Good to see you, Cherry. Welcome to the gang. Ronnie Dio. If I arrive on a tourist visa and want to apply for digital nomad visa, what documents would I absolutely need to already have? Ronnie, so if you're coming like from the US, right, if you need to bring something with you, the one that is an absolute must is gonna be, even this one we could take care later on. But let me give you an answer, right? Like, I think the apostilled birth certificate is gonna be the one that is gonna help you a lot. That's gonna make your life much easier if you bring this document from the U.S. Okay, but for the digital nomad, Ronnie, what happens very often with our clients is something like this. They come to Brazil, they just wanna, try the water, test the waters, and they're here for 2 months, and then they say, you know what, like I'm really enjoying, right? Like, I mean, I'm living better than in the U.S. Food is better, like maybe climate is better. They are having a blast with their connections in Brazil, and they are able to make money in the U.S. and spend in Brazil. This is the so-called geo arbitrage, right? Meaning you're making money in a place in which you can make a lot of money, and you're spending money in a place that you're not going to be spending a lot of money. So you're doing the geo arbitrage, and then you say, you know what, I want to stay here. So for many of our clients, that's how it's going to happen. So they are coming to Brazil, they're experiencing Brazil without a planning for immigration ahead of time, just because that was not the original intention, right? And this is actually a large chunk of our digital nomad applicants. And if that's the case, we can still obtain their birth certificate in the US. We have an office in Dallas, right? Like, so they, even if they don't have a birth certificate, there is a service that issues one. Then we can receive on their behalf. Once we receive it, we get the the apostille through a service provider done in the US. Once the apostille, the birth certificate, is ready, this document can be shipped from Dallas, to São Paulo or Rio de Janeiro, and then from there we can complete your application in Brazil. All right, Ronnie. So yes, if you want to make your life easier, you can bring the apostilled birth certificate with you. Or if you are already in Brazil, that's something we can work out as well. Ok, Wilbert Bailey. Olá, senhor Oliveira. Olá, Wilbert. Você pode compartilhar quais são os benefícios de um visto de aposentadoria? Posso viajar para o Brasil em qualquer época do ano. All right, Wilbert is here practicing his Portuguese, which reads just like native. Good job, Wilbert. And he's asking, about the advantages of a retirement visa. So, Wilbert, even though the Brazil immigration does not really, at least so far, is not really, following closely. The retirement visa is not for you to come to Brazil as you please. It's more for you to actually stay in Brazil. Okay, like there is an expectation that you would stay in Brazil most of the time. So we always tell our clients, like, we never saw anyone being denied a renewal. For just staying a few months per year in Brazil. But in theory, that's not what you should be doing. Now, considering Wilbert, that you are staying in Brazil for most of the time, then what I can tell you is that you can travel to the U.S., to Europe, or anywhere you want, as many times as you want, and you're going to be able to enter Brazil without an issue, right? So I would say, the main benefit is for you to be able to stay in Brazil for as long as you want. But yes, another benefit would be for you to be able, to come and go as you please. Okay, another big advantage, Wilbert, and maybe, in addition to those two, it's the biggest one. Nowadays, the retirement visa is giving you a very solid track to permanent residency. So, for many applicants, after they've been in Brazil under the retirement visa for a couple of years, they can actually renew on a permanent basis, meaning they stay 2 years on a temporary basis. And then after these 2 years, when they renew the visa, or the residency, better saying, they are going to get the permanent residency. All right. So, nowadays, the Brazil retirement visa or Brazil retirement residency, they are really high-level immigration pathways to Brazil, Wilbert. Okay, I hope that was helpful. And again, congratulations for the Portuguese. Josh Yolas at Honidio, highly recommend you get your birth certificate apostilled while you live in the U.S. Each state has a different process, but they are easy to figure out and a lot cheaper than made into Brazil. Absolutely, Josh. Yes, if you handle that ahead of time, you don't need to rush. You don't need to pay, like rushed fees, right? And made into Brazil, just like Josh is saying, it's expensive already. Now, if you FedEx to Brazil from the United States, typically is going to cost around $100, right? So, when you need to rush things, yes, things get expensive real quick. Nice sharing, Josh. Jonathan McMillan, once I purchase a property and obtain the golden visa, after this, when can I apply for dual citizenship? Jonathan, so timeline is like, buy the property. After you have secured the new title, it takes us like about 3 months to get to the Brazil investor residency. And that's when the first 4 years start to count. Okay, so 4 years of temporary residency. By the 4th year, you're going to renew on a permanent basis. So 4 years of permanent residency, an additional 4 years of, permanent residency, and that's when you can apply for, the dual citizenship. So we're talking about 8 years. All right, Jonathan. And something very interesting, like if you see, other people in other channels, many times they're going to tell you that it takes just 4 years, right? And I don't know where they get, the idea from, but if you go by, like the legal, by the legal rules, and even like by the immigration application systems, like there is no way for you to apply in 4 years for the permanent residency, right? There is no such route. First, you need to have 4 years as a temporary residency. Then you can renew your real estate investor residency as permanent. And then only after 4 years of permanent residency, that's when you can apply for the citizenship. All right, Jonathan, I know it sounds like, a lot of time. Something interesting for you to, note is that many of our clients, right, they start on a certain journey and their journey changes over time, right? So some people, they're going to start with the Brazil, investor visa. And then once they're in Brazil, like a couple of years down the line, they meet like, a romantic partner, they marry. And once you marry, you can secure the permanent residency right away. And through the marriage route, in a single year as a permanent resident, you can apply for the citizenship, right? So you never know what the future stores for you. And just sharing that many of our clients, we do see this type of, evolution. Okay, keep in mind, Jonathan, let's say 8 years, it does sound like a lot of time, but many times, things change and you could potentially apply much sooner than in 80 years, okay? Wilbert Bailey, obrigado, de nada, Wilbert. All right, RB, welcome, RD. I am in Brazil, and I have a business, simple national. Now I'm making enough money to apply for a nomad visa. If I do it, can I keep paying taxes via the social number, or need to change to Carnê Leão? Right. So yeah, RD. So if you become a digital nomad, right, and if you have a business, simple national. Yeah. So when you have a digital nomad, right, you cannot be working in Brazil. Okay. So if you have a business, simple national, it does sound like you would have like a meaningful work activity in Brazil. So from a legal perspective, RD, the digital nomad is not compliant. Okay. The digital nomad is very specific for those who are, working for an entity abroad. Okay. And when you say a business simply national, it sounds to me like you're talking about a Brazilian entity, right? So if you have a Brazilian entity, to our understanding, the digital nomad is not accessible to you. Okay. Now let's think about another scenario, like, a general applicant. They have an entity in the US and, they apply for the digital nomad. The digital nomad does not cause and does not shield tax residency, right? Like the immigration residency, typically, unless we're talking about permanent residency, the immigration generally is not going to necessarily trigger tax residency. What's going to happen is, like, once you have been in Brazil for 183 days, in any given 365 days, it doesn't need to be a calendar year. It doesn't need to be in any particular, form and shape. It just needs to be like 183 days, over 183 days in any given 365. When that happens, you become a tax resident in Brazil. Okay, and if you have an entity in the U.S., if you have income coming like on a recurring basis, yes, you would typically have to file, monthly tax reports, to disclose your income on a monthly basis using the Carnê Leão. All right, like for those of you who don't know, Carnê Leão is basically just a payment coupon or a payment system that's going to allow you to pay your taxes on a monthly basis, so you can be compliant with the taxation model. All right. Nice question, RD. Josh Yolas, I've read online that there are cheaper investor visa applications unrelated to real estate. Are these options common or more difficult to apply for? Josh, so there is, first thing, like, I'm not sure if you've been following us for a while, but typically we don't like the business oriented investor routes just because of the major downsides that we see, right? Some of them are going to be the first one, right? Like you entangling your immigration journey with business, right? So you come into a new country, Maybe you are a business person, maybe you're not, but it just sounds like a bad idea, to entangle those two things, right? Like immigration is very serious, so it should not be entangled to business, right? That's our first concern. The second one is about, like the business reality in Brazil, like taxation complexities. One of the main problems we also see is like labor, legislation, which is like almost like 100 years old in Brazil. It does dictate like a huge number of obligations for the employer. Is extremely different from what you see in the US, right? Like in Brazil, like you cannot even fire people. Like if you fire, you need to pay like, a substantial, fine to the employee because you're firing the employee, right? Many times you pay every single thing that you should be paying as per the law, and still some employees, they are going to sue you to take another bite at the apple, right? Very typical labor legislation. Like, I think Brazil is number one, throughout the globe in labor litigation, okay? So because of all of those reasons, Josh, like we typically don't like that particular route. And unless the person has already some level of business experience in Brazil, we're not going to actually accept the assignment. We're not going to be providing the service, right? So these are, some of the downsides. Another major one, which I think people don't think about, is that you need to create jobs. And like the regulation says very clearly that the Brazilian authorities, they may, like go and check if you are creating the employment that you said you would. Okay, so, many people, they start like a business, they send the money to Brazil. It's just like, like 500,000 reais, so less than $100,000. They start a company, and then, not surprisingly, a year down the line, the business is no longer operating. They try to recover some money. This thing becomes a mess, and whoever was with you is going to be entangled in the mess, right? And then they are trying to, understand what they're going to do, because now they have the residency based on the investment, but the business is no longer in place. Now they need to do something about it, but the business that you presented at the application is no longer in place. So it's just too messy, in our opinion, Josh. But I know there is a lot of opinions out there that let's just open a business and everything is gonna be all right. Okay, we do know about this type of route. We just don't see as worthy for our clients, Josh. But thank you for asking. All right, so we are arriving at the end of today's live stream. I want to say thank you all for the participation. I want to say thank you to Brazil Vibes for buying me lunch. Very generous of you. And listen, we're going to have our next live stream on Sunday. This is going to be our second Sunday of the month of September. And what we are trying to do is to keep our live streams on Wednesdays as consistent as possible. Yes, we're still going to skip some, but we try to keep it more consistent. And on Sundays, we're trying to get 2 Sundays a month. And, our second Sunday for the month of September is going to be this coming Sunday. So if you want to, come back and participate with us, it's going to be a blast. I'm going to be very happy to see you. It's going to be Sunday, September the 28th. Now, remember, the time on Sundays is not going to be the same, 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. Is actually going to be 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time. And if you go to YouTube right now, you can click on Notify Me. So when our live stream starts, you're going to be notified, and then you can join us for more interesting discussions. Again, thank you all for participating.